The following news flash is brought to you by the Lone Star Lowdown, providing your daily bulletins for the commodities market. Today in history, news updates, and the inside scoop into the tides of the alternative. Markets for Wednesday the 27th of January 2016 opened up with gold at $1,120 an ounce, silver $14.48 an ounce, Texas crude $31.45 a barrel, and Bitcoin is currently sitting at about $395 U.S. currency. Today in history, Thursday, January 27th, 1825. The U.S. Congress approves Indian Territory in what is present-day Oklahoma. This cleared the way for the forced relocation of Eastern Indians, known as the Trail of Tears. In recent news, the Vatican announced over the weekend that Pope Francis will be visiting Sweden later this year to mark the 500th anniversary of Martin Luther's writing and posting of the 95 Theses on the front doors of All Saints Church in Wittenberg, Germany, October 31st, 1517. Amongst other points, Luther primarily wrote argumentations against the Roman Catholic theology of indulgences, essentially the selling of forgiveness from temporal punishment, from sins for money, a practice still upheld by the Church. On October 31st of this year, Francis is set to be at the southern Swedish city of Lund, where the Lutheran World Federation was founded in 1947. While his predecessors have visited Protestant churches, Francis has come under criticism from traditionalists and conservatives within the Church, who accuse him of sending conflicting signals about interfaith relations. Catholic traditionalists have accused Francis of making too many concessions to Lutherans, since both religions will be using Luther's Common Prayer during the 2017 Reformation commemoration services being held jointly between the two churches, which they say excessively praise Luther, who was historically condemned as a heretic and excommunicated. Pope Francis made ecumenism one of the main themes of his papacy, considering he has already visited the Lutheran Church of Rome, the Waldensian Protestant community in northern Italy, Rome's Jewish synagogue, and is soon due to become the first pope to visit Rome's mosque later this year. Marvin Minsky, a pioneer in the field of artificial intelligence at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, died Sunday at the age of 88. Minsky viewed the brain as a machine whose function can be studied and replicated in a computer, and he considered how machines might be endowed with common sense or artificial intelligence. Daniela Rust, director of MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, said that Minsky helped create the vision of artificial intelligence as we know it today. This was your lowdown for January 27, 2016.
No one had a bad trip. It was all very good. No one had a bad trip. It was all very good. Nope. It was all very good.
I walk when they say run, and I run when they shoot me up. No, they won't let me out of the asylum. No, they won't let me out of the asylum.
And good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're listening to us on the nationally syndicated Logos Radio Network. For the next 3 hours, you will be tuning into Be Brave Radio, broadcasting from the fabulous studios of Brave New Books. I am Leland Freeman.
I am Elizabeth Egan Everett.
And before we get started on this very stacked show featuring our New York Times best-selling author, Jim Marrs, as well as a conversation with a Central Texas law enforcement officer on this wonderful January 30th, 2016, there's actually a couple events that I would like to plug first. Later today at Brave New Books from 4 to 7 p.m., there's going to be an open carry symposium and mini conference with various leaders of the open carry movement, such as Michael Cargill, Justin DeLage. I'll be moderating a panel. Please come out free and open to the public, and if you're legally, lawfully open carrying a handgun, that you will have 10% off of any and all purchases at Brave New Books. And later tonight, if you're curious to what our theme song for Be Brave Radio is, the song is actually called Asylum by my friends at 333, and they're having a show tonight in Pflugerville at Hanover's, and it starts, I believe, at 8, and there's three other bands, including David Comey, the Attorney That Rocks. Now, Elizabeth, there were a ton of headlines, a ton this week.
It's been interesting to dig into all those different subjects, to watch what's going on the planet, also to watch what's happening locally, also in our own lives. I mean, I locked myself out of my Jeep last night. That was a fun experience, and I had to ask my dear friends to come to the rescue, which they did. And one of them was Leland, another one was his dear friend Ryan. So I'm deeply grateful for that. But I think we're just coming out of Mercury retrograde, and we are beginning to step into some new exciting things also occurring. It's still a little messy, still a lot of intensity for a lot of people right now. For example, we've been watching a lot of drama, unfortunately, occur up in Oregon. I know that that's one of the big things that I've been paying attention to, doing some research with. Are you much on that, up on that topic, Leland?
The background surrounding the Bundys taking over the wildlife refuge, I'm not terribly familiar with, but I did see what happened this week where there was that road blockade and one of the guys was killed by the FBI.
Well, it's interesting to see the varying reports, both from some of the witnesses that are there versus the narrative that's been spun in the media. And it's also interesting to suddenly get the bird's eye view of really zooming in and paying attention to the drone footage. We're watching a guy who jumped out of his car, had his hands up in the air. Initially, I know from my first read of it, I thought, oh my gosh, he's going for a gun. You see this guy coming in from off the side. They were obviously waiting in ambush. There was a girl in the car, Victoria Sharps, who gave a very interesting eyewitness account as well. And she was talking about how there were snipers up in the trees. The story was that there were only 3 shots fired, which I can see with my own eyes that there were many more than that. But her reports are that there were at least 100, and that now, from what I saw and looking into other people's real deep research on the subject, they're thinking now that Lavoie was actually was shot, and there was a recoil action from one of the guns, and so he went to where he was shot on his body, and it wasn't him actually going for the gun, and then they did execute him. So much for following through due process of law and following through with justice. I think there really is an issue there. And from what I understand, there seems to be 4 people still in the compound, and one of them is a pregnant woman. So let's hope everything is resolved peacefully.
Well, the whole thing was really weird about how the footage was released. First, the footage was released within 2 days. In recent history, how many of these incidents with the FBI has it taken years for footage to get out? And then they claim the only thing they edited out was telemetry data with all the little blacked out things on the screen. And then they released the footage to their official YouTube page from it being the FBI. And the other interesting thing is they didn't sync up any radio to it, any radio broadcast. So you had to basically look through this footage, and it was silent. And the weird thing is that when the Bundy car took off, they had this roadblock set up, and then there was some guy just standing in the middle of the snow, like they were trying to entrap him to saying he ran down a federal official, which in itself is a very bad capital crime. So it's just, the whole thing just reeks.
Yeah, no, there is a lot of stuff that needs to be looked at. Obviously, what we're learning in this day and age of the internet and so much overload and overwhelm of information, we are, at least at this point in our sovereignty, able to do some serious research for ourselves. And back in the days, for example, of JFK, when now, we're even learning that there was some mucking about on some of the film footage that was seen, also to do with a lot of the photographs that came out with Oswald. That even back then there were some shenanigans afoot, and but in this day and age now, even with all of that going on at an extremely more advanced level, we still are able to separate the wheat from the chaff, per se. Now, mind you, they're going to try to shut the internet more and more down, with, which is what we're seeing with things like CISA, but at least for this time, we are still able to do some deductive reasoning and do some thinking for ourselves.
Well, I think in general on both sides of the population that people are just fed up with the status quo. I mean, if you look at the debates on both the Democrats and the Republicans, it's very, very polarizing. And the other interesting thing is that, well, first we could talk about Trump skipping on the debate.
Well, and how he actually won the debate by doing that. But let's also remember that Ronald Reagan also did. He skipped the Iowa caucus back in the 1980s, and he did the same, and he also won the election. So this is not anything new. This is not anything crazy or scoundreling. This has been done before. But I'm still amazed that this is really the best that we've got. Out of 300 million amazing individuals here in America, we're still passing the crown back and forth between these old mafia families that are all tied in together and all doing business, in the back rooms.
They're all multimillionaires.
And yet, here's the thing that blows my mind. The people are still falling for it. they're still falling for somehow this belief that there's going to be some kind of change coming from, the same old families and the same old, people that are basically the puppets of the oligarchs, the bankers, the corporations, the lobbyists. It's time for a change, and they're also falling for the same, stuff that occurred years ago with Obama. My friends are all hooping and hollering for Bernie Sanders when he's just as bad as the rest of them. And here's Trump too, which is he knows what to say, and yet this guy is just another straw man. He's got the same kind of backings to Israel. He is really big on militarization. I don't know if you guys remember that in the news, but also about shutting down the internet. This is a guy who's still pushing basically the same story of the 9/11 official narrative, which we all know at this point is a bunch of bunk. So it's pretty. Yeah,
he is and he isn't. That's the interesting thing about it. He is open to other than the official story, but the oddball thing is he still pushes the lone gunman Kennedy assassination narrative.
Well, I think the thing is that on a certain level I honor it because I know he has to walk a fine line of having one foot in the establishment, but he's also hooking into a very specific demographic of libertarians, the beings that are fed up, the Tea Partiers, people like that. So he knows what he's doing. He's got amazing advisors. And look, one of our heroes, Roger Stone, is absolutely assisting him in that. So I do honor that.
But he also wrote the definitive guide on the Kennedy assassination since Crossfire.
Yes.
That being the case against LBJ? It's a long-winded title. Roger's first two books had these really long titles, and now his third and fourth book, Clinton's War on Women and Jeb, the Bush crime family. Why do I keep saying factory when I say that?
Because it is a factory.
Might as well be, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah. If you look at Bernie's, getting back to the debate, if you look at Bernie Sanders, he's worth $600,000. And he had the fact is he's a communist through and through. He had what Roger said on week one of this show, he had his, honeymoon in the Soviet Union?
Yeah, no, he did. But it's also interesting that he's already been going to have meetings with Obama in the White House, which means, they're definitely looking forward and seeing what his position is in this whole, puppet show. So that's occurring. And then have you seen all the hilarity behind Ted Cruz recently in exposing his inner character? Some of the original videos about his personality.
Oh, yeah, I'm ruling the world.
Well, not only that, but what a classy guy.
I want to be a porn star or rule the world pretty much.
No. He's like, what aspirations? Is that like the sweat on my butt? And then he's saying, yeah, I want to take over the world. World domination, rich, powerful, that sort of stuff. And then when his dad is asked about that retort, he was asked, do you think Ted's going to rule the world? And his father said, I hope not. And then one of his first freshman college roommates has been becoming quite infamous over the internet. He's been doing a lot of tweets all about his experience with Ted Cruz. And some of my favorite quotes that I pulled from that is he said, he was widely loathed. It was his superpower. Ted would leave a greasy film on everything. My friend, Eric, dubbed the substance Cruz, rhymes with scuzz. And now there's Cruz on my TV. And it's like, hey, wow, we want this guy as, our POTUS? This is our next president? Seriously? Yeah, I'll pass. I mean,
I've got balls of steel.
I'm sure he thinks he does, and with a wife who works for Goldman Sachs since 2005.
And of course, he didn't disclose that he got a loan from Goldman Sachs for a Senate campaign.
Sweetheart loan, yeah.
And he didn't vote for the audit the Fed bill, which even Bernie Sanders voted for.
Well, and that's because Bernie knew that he couldn't not do that this time, that too many people were paying attention, to that. So, yeah, guys, this is the best that we've got, and mind you, the one thing I did like about the debates is I do feel that Rand Paul had a little bit of he came in and definitely I feel made such a difference that evening. And please don't drop out, Rand. We need you. I mean, I don't believe in everything that he stands for. He is definitely not his father.
Definitely
but
isn't.
Goodness gracious, do we need some sentience right now? I'd like to think that he ever so slightly keeps the reins, tautly in control, because everybody else is off, throwing the war drums about and pontificating and being arrogant and insulting each other and what have you.
Anyway, we will pick this conversation up after this quick commercial break on the Logos Radio Network. This is Be Brave Radio. I am Leland Freeman.
I'm Elizabeth Egan Everett.
And please stay tuned and enjoy our some PSAs from our wonderful sponsors here on the Logos Radio Network.
You are listening to the Logos Radio Network. LogosRadioNetwork.com.
and welcome back to Be Brave Radio here on the Logos Radio Network. I'm Leland Freeman, joined by Elizabeth Egan Everett. John Bush is pulling double duty on this show, for at least for the first couple hours where he's having to produce, but he'll be joining us in the third hour with our conversation with the Central Texas law enforcement officer. Keep in mind, this is January 30th, 2016. Where did this month go? We're having an event this afternoon, actually, at Brave New Books, an open carry symposium with leaders of the open carry movement, such as Richard Briscoe from Open Carry Texas, Justin DeLoche from Lone Star Gun Rights, Michael Cargill, Stephen Sheftel. It should be a great event. It goes from 4 to 7. Parking around the bookstore. There are metered parking spaces around the bookstore as well as the garage 1 block west. Do not park in any of the surface parking lots of the other businesses. You will get towed. And also, the show is brought to you by our wonderful friends at the Logos Radio Network. There is a pledge drive going on at logosradionetwork.com that helps keep the lights on and keeps all of our wonderful shows on this network up and running. So head on out there. Now, Elizabeth, we were talking about the chaos, if you will, in the conventions and the fact that it's still the same oligarchs, more or less, that they fielded. And the fact is that if it comes out to a populist decision for Sanders and Trump, that both conventions might be brokered and they might try to stick either Biden
or Bloomberg.
Bloomberg is, I don't know what Bloomberg is thinking because no Republican's going to vote for him.
Well, and I think he's understandably way too toxic. You know, he basically has his own private armies. You know, he's trying to...
The mom's the man action?
Well, deeper than that. He has his own little mini police force. This is a guy that does not care about the little people, per se. He's trying to take away the guns. He's doing all kinds of strange...
He's also trying to take away the big gulps, too.
Well, now it's war.
They took our guns. Like, I don't care about guns. Well, they took away my big gulp. I'm like, wait, that's war. I want to have my free refills with the giant sodas.
Oh, man. Yeah, no, we're seeing some fine people up there that we're, getting to elect for president. But
one might be under indictment by the FBI.
Well, see, now that's what's interesting is that a former congressman just came out and said that we are actually possibly witnessing the fall of the House of Clinton. Wow. Could you imagine? Wouldn't it be amazing if we could actually see that where, this woman should be in prison?
So should her daughter and so should her husband.
Yeah. Well, considering that Obama is now saying that some of those emails are too damaging to even release.
At least 22 of them.
There's something like 7 email chains, and now 100 FBI agents, that are researching everything. And it's like, look, if they don't come out with the ruling that that these people have to be tried, that they have to be put in prison, I mean, we can all see it. Why can't you? It's pretty obvious.
Well, the fact that even Tom DeLay leaked it, that she should be indicted, and the fact is that for her to say, "Oh shucks," with the private, I mean, why did she have a private email server in the first place? And the fact that server was apparently hacked by the Chinese and every other entity that has legitimate beef with the administration. I mean, it just boggles my mind. And then I'm just curious what you know about Benghazi. That a friend of mine, Noah, and I went last week to see 13 Hours. It didn't specifically target Hillary, but it was a very, very gruesome movie, and it did show the stand down from the leadership. That they didn't want this. They did not want the ambassador rescued, and then they weren't going to rescue the CIA operatives that were in Benghazi.
Yeah, I think she knew a lot. The fact that she wiped the servers, so much for transparency in this day and age. It doesn't seem to go both ways, eh? They want transparency with us, with all the spying and taking on, all the NSA material. But no, they don't want to divulge anything with what they're up to.
Yeah, we can't. They want to take away our guns, but God forbid, let's give
our privacy.
But they're going to give El Chapo Barrett 50 cals through Fast and Furious that we're paying for.
Oh yeah, well, and then cry crocodile tears, while they're doing that and droning, and killing innocent people. So, oh yay, it's all pretty astonishing right now to pay attention to the blatant lying that's been going on. And yet, there are people I know right now who absolutely, on social media, for example, they'll be like, Obama, oh my God, what a compassionate man. He cares. We love him. It's like, oh my gosh, you've been duped by an extremely charismatic man who's been trained from day one, to be exactly like that. And yet these guys are falling for it. There's too much fluoride in the water. I guess lead too, if you're in Michigan.
Or in Travis County.
Well, it came out?
No, we're good. No, I'm just saying in Travis County, there is KXAN, our NBC affiliate here in Austin, Texas, said that there's elevated levels in our water supply.
Yes.
We do have a solution that we sell at Brave New Books. It's called the ProPure Water Filter. Not to do too many shameless plugs during this broadcast. But,
Well, I think the thing is from what I understand, is that a lot of the systems across America are old and dilapidated and need to be up-leveled. And so people are actually realizing that there's an awful lot of toxicity, not only lead in our water, which is why it's so important right now to be filtering anything that you're drinking. But, I think what's fascinating, especially though about Flint, Michigan, is the fact that there's a whole bunch of emails being leaked that not only were the people being laughed at and insulted about drinking the water, but some of the higher ups knew full well that the water was toxic, and they were shipping in bottled water like weeks beforehand to take care of their own employees, to take care of themselves, knowing that there was an issue.
I wonder if they also added fluoride to that particular water supply, like most municipalities here in Texas. Well, not just in Texas, in the United States. The fact that Western Europe countries, a lot of them have banned fluoride. Israel has banned adding fluoride, which is an industrial waste, and it's reactive. It reacts with other metals in the water.
Yeah, and that's not even the worst of it at this point. There's all these pharmaceuticals that are the runoff that go into the water as well, like lithium. And, here's the thing. If you're wondering if, you're not making, deep connections to important thoughts and concepts, and, if you just feel a little less than the way that you used to be, if it's not just aging, it's also because you're really not paying attention to things that really do matter right now, which is your health, so are you filtering your water? Are you working with the superfoods? Are you eating the organic foods? Even the highest grade organic food these days, you're only going to get about 14 minerals and nutrients in it, because the soil is so depleted that you really actually have to do more due diligence. You've got to really get out there, do some research, and start bringing in other healthy items into your diet.
Now, the interesting thing about the soil depletion of minerals, this actually leads to the insects being able to actually gnaw on the crops. So it's a never-ending cycle. So Monsanto loves this. They farm the soil, then the crops are weak because they don't have minerals to reinforce themselves, and so then these insects then eat the crops, and then they can sell these insecticides such as Roundup, which causes cancer.
Right.
It's just a never-ending cycle. I mean, it's sad that we have to revert to buying vitamin and mineral supplements such as from Longevity to keep ourselves healthy. Berk superfoods as well.
But there's a lot of food these days that you can find if you do the homework. Unfortunately, it is a little more expensive, but really, with what's going on the planet right now, you have to be on your A game. You really have to, and look, again, I think that's the thing that allows me at least to keep sane, is that, knowing all this information, waking up to all this information. I remember there was a period in my life where for several years when I was doing all this research, when you take the red pill, like in the Matrix per se, it's extremely profoundly terrifying to realize what's really actually going on. And there's a whole phase that people go through, and often they don't want to know. They want to go back to sleep. But the thing that I've found that's really made all the difference and has allowed me to sail through, especially dealing with the anxiety, the stress, is to eat well and to also work with the supplements. I've been a Chinese herbalist for about 20 years now. It saved my life many years ago, and I think it continues to save my life. So I really do suggest that for anybody who's listening. If you're a little nervous, if you're a little scared, with all the information of what you're seeing and what you're waking up to, tap into the true matrix, tap into the real, galactic Gaia, work with the plants.
And we are coming up on another commercial break here on Logos Radio Network. This is Be Brave Radio. We will be back with you right after this short break.
Come on back now, you hear?
Hold the cages and dump the crates. Burger King is improving the conditions of the animals it uses for meat. It's a victory for the animals and for BK customers. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht, back with more on this whopper of an announcement next.
Privacy is under attack. When you give up data about yourself, you'll never get it back again. And once your privacy is gone, you'll find your freedoms will start to vanish too. So protect your rights, say no to surveillance, and keep your information to yourself. Privacy, it's worth hanging on to. This message is brought to you by StartPage.com, the private search engine alternative to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Start over with StartPage.
People who care about animal welfare are crowing over Burger King's promise to phase out breeding cages and crates for its chickens and pigs by 2017. It's the most sweeping pledge yet in the multi-billion-dollar fast food industry. For years, animal rights groups have called for changes in the way livestock are treated, like confining animals in tiny pens with concrete floors covered in manure. With mad cow disease plus undercover investigations into these inhumane conditions, the public wants a change. Isn't it great that consumer pressure can have an impact, even on the king of fast food? I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht for StartPage.com, the world's most private search engine.
You're listening to the Logos Radio Network. at logosradionetwork.com.
Coming down, coming down now. Touch the
And welcome back to Be Brave Radio here on the Logos Radio Network. You can go to logosradionetwork.com and listen to our archives or partake in the pledge drive that keeps that network up and running, and also support their sponsors. This is truly user-supported radio. We don't have any major corporate underwriters or whatnot, as well as the individual sponsors that help keep Be Brave Radio operational. Brave New Books, Hill Country Home Improvement, Nature's Pure Organics, and our newest sponsor, Cabo Bob's, with locations on the Drag, as well as Ben White Boulevard here in Austin, Texas. They have these amazingly large burritos. It's very delicious. I highly recommend going there.
Awesome.
As they was on the old Rocky and Bullwinkle show, I know, dating myself. When we last left our heroes, we were talking about how the world was going into chaos and all this garbage about GMO foods. But the interesting thing is you don't necessarily have to be a full-time health person. You can just, the whole point of living and being on this planet for the short time that we have is enjoying yourself. So it won't kill you to enjoy the occasional cheeseburger from time to time.
Well, look, and the thing is that I have a whole apothecary of the most profound, amazing herbs on this planet that I work with and I have worked with for the last 20 years. But you know what? I've always said that I'm a flexitarian just because of what I've been through. And, you know, if I want to eat, some McDonald's or have some chocolate, or if I want some pasta or whatever, I am very much about working with balance, finding a middle road, the yin yang per se. I'm also all about owning my shadow. And I found that when I was extremely pure, extremely healthy, I went through the raw foods. I worked with being vegan. I did all of that for many years, and I found that there was another part of me that was simply not being fed, and I had a different kind of imbalance when I was extremely pure. And now for me, what I find works is that I take a lot of healthy foods and supplements, but I also enjoy myself as well.
And the other interesting thing about it is that you're watching capitalism at work with a lot of these restaurants, such as McDonald's and Chipotle. McDonald's recently has switched from margarine to real butter for their Egg McMuffins. Chipotle as well. They dropped GMO from all their burritos, and notice that here's the interesting thing. I think there's a little bit of corporate espionage going on with Chipotle because now people are starting to get listeria. I don't think that's because they went to organic. Hardly. I think their food supply is being tampered with.
Well, they're being meddled with. I think there's
it's
a deliberate situation where they're being taken down. And as long as people are aware of that and can continue to support a business like that actually listens to its customers and tries to choose higher level ingredients, this is the stuff that makes a difference. We need to vote with our wallets, and we are making a difference. It's something really silly, but yet it's actually pretty profound. The difference between you choosing the Mexican Coca-Cola over the American-made Coca-Cola. It's like, I never thought I'd say that, choosing sugar over high fructose corn syrup was a healthier choice. But you know what, though? It is. And it actually goes back to the original recipe, which honors all 5 flavors. They call it umami. Someone was very smart when they made that original recipe.
Or even worse, aspartame, which of interest, that Diet Pepsi dropped aspartame for sucralose, which is not really any better. But then you have all these people going to social media because their pineal gland is so calcified. They're going, I miss my aspartame. I go, would you miss sticking a gun in your mouth too?
Oh, dear. Well, and also be aware that aspartame hasn't necessarily disappeared. They've actually been changing the name. It's a PR move. For example, one of the new names for aspartame is actually amino sweet. So be aware, just because something says natural flavors does not mean it's natural. Unfortunately, a lot of those words are now extremely dumbed down and no longer mean what they say it does, in the marketing world. For example, organic is not really what you think it is anymore. You've got companies like Kraft buying up the fields, and obviously it's a different dynamic. It's not as healthy as you would think anymore.
Well, the basic definition for organic means carbon-based. So anything with carbon atoms in their molecule chain is technically organic. And the other thing too is all the powers that be are basically lobbying Congress to prevent labeling of what's actually in our food, such as GMO or the origin. Whole Foods, for example, they mask a lot of stuff with natural flavors, such as MSG, because that occurs naturally. When you see something that says no artificial flavors, and then you look on the back that says natural flavors, it still mean MSG or preservatives.
Well, and you can't even pronounce half of the ingredients on the label anyway. Look, at the end of the day, if you can take the extra time out to look up where your local farmers markets are, And, you go there with a little shopping basket. And not only do you support the local businesses, whether it's the farmers markets there or, Brave New Bookstore here or the people that you know. Again, it's about assisting your tribe. And then what I try to do, which I've been doing over the last couple of weeks, is that I stop into the local juicing bar and I get a fresh juice made for me right on the spot. So, all the goodness, there's a lot of oxygenation that occurs in the first 10 minutes of juicing any fruits and vegetables. And so you really want to drink it quite quickly. And obviously, if you're buying the same kind of thing in the grocery store, it's going to be this, it's just not going to have the same level of potency.
All right, grind your own coffee, grind your own, what is it, the stuff they use for your liver? What's it called? Milk thistle.
Well, milk thistle you have to be a little wary of because milk thistle by itself only really takes care of the twofold liver clearing process. You really want to make sure that both aspects of clearing out the trash per se from the liver is taken care of, and milk thistle only actually handles one part of that. And that's why it's really important to look into liver supplements that have everything balanced out. Usually milk thistle will be one of those items, but to take milk thistle by itself, at least long term, you can do it short term, but long term is not always the wisest choice.
Getting back to supporting your tribe, if you look at what a lot of government agencies are trying to do, they're trying to prevent you from collecting your own rainwater. They're trying to prevent you from growing your own garden. Have your own chickens for your free-range eggs. Banning farmers markets. It's just...
they're mandating vaccines. They're not allowing you to sidestep a lot of the poisons more and more and more that they're putting into our ecological system. I used to have this belief that if you were savvy enough and smart enough to do the research to see where the poison was, you could sidestep it. Almost that's some sort of way of,
It's in everything now.
Well, and see, that's the issue is that I think there's a lot of cheating going on by the elites per se in how they're trying to cull the population. And unfortunately, with them trying to push the vaccines, there's a situation now cropping up around the Zika virus. If you actually do a fair amount of research, there are some interesting questions that are arising from that, in that the area where the Zika virus has been breaking out the most with the children, with the shrunken brains, you'll actually find that a lot of the genetically modified mosquitoes were released a couple years ago. And if you dig even deeper still, right around 2014, there was a Tdap vaccine that was mandated to the pregnant women during that time. So some people are actually more pointing to that issue, that might be a reasoning for what we're seeing right now.
That's
Interesting.
Because I'm just thinking, like, you're not supposed to drink when you're pregnant. You're not supposed to smoke. You're supposed to eat healthy because your baby is developing
Right.
its fresh DNA. It hasn't, been hardened and
Can you imagine?
formalized versus an adult, which is, it's not good for an adult to take that too, but it's
Yeah.
not forming organs with the damaging the stem cells.
Yeah, and suddenly you want to put a bunch of junk and adjuvants into that that little baby, that fetus, so it's what a surprise. All these birth defects are being shown.
Or high levels of autism.
Yeah, I mean, and I've seen this much closer to home with some of my friends who unwisely, when they were pregnant, had certain vaccines, and sure enough, the children are having some major problems. And it's the worst thing. Many of my friends who started out to be pro-vaxxers, became anti-vaxxers because of what they had happened to their own children.
And you
Can
got
you imagine?
to give Donald Trump credit for actually bringing that up at the debate, along with Rand Paul, to
Yes.
basically shoot down Ben Carson.
Well, yes, and look, if you don't want to read those inserts, if you don't want to do the research, which is definitely out there, and you want to go ahead and you want to line up and get those shots, well, you go for it. But please, do not make this about other people having to go and get it. We need to have Sean Siegel on. I'd love to have him come on and discuss this at a deeper level.
Well, Jim Marrs, whose latest book, Population Control, I believe, is coming on in the next segment, and it deals with this topic. And
Yeah.
they want to eliminate 95% of the world population. And I'm just
Yeah.
curious why they want to do it. We can also talk about the economy and how Obama was full of it at the State of the Union address, with Amazon and Apple going down the toilet. But this is Be Brave Radio on the Logos Radio Network. We will be back right after this break.
See you soon. See.
I will live my
going crazy these days.
And welcome back to Be Brave Radio here on the Logos Radio Network. I'm Leland Freeman.
I'm Elizabeth Egan Everett.
And we're having a little bit of technical issues bringing Jim Mars on, but we will have him on the show either in this segment or the following segment. We were previously talking about the Zika virus, and I think we should keep going on about that and how they're using all these hidden Trojans. Who knows what they're putting in our food supply?
Well, I think that's happening. We've got a lot of different dynamics occurring on the world stage, whether it's the economy, whether it's the stock market, whether it's the push for, shutting down the internet here and there, controlling free speech, all this divide and conquer that's occurring, a lot of situations of bringing over the Syrian refugees. I mean, it's all on. So, there's all these different angles occurring. That's why it's so important to be aware of your health, your immune system. When you're in a strong state of mind and state of body, to do a little bit of detoxing. This is the time cyclically to do detox and to just get awake and informed, make the connections with your friends and family, do a little bit of prepping, and especially the most important thing, for example, what we're seeing with the economy right now, the ruble's crashing in Russia, but what people are discovering over in Russia is that they're actually really connecting on a more grassroots level with their bartering. What skills do people have? That really is what matters right now, is to especially look to what can you learn that's helpful in this time for other people and for yourself.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the economy. It's been a really, really, really bad January for the economy. I mean, you first have Obama say, well, the economy's stronger than ever. And then you look at the earnings reports from Apple, you look at the earnings reports on Amazon. For example, Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, lost $6 billion in an afternoon. In an afternoon when the stock price got hammered. But yet the stock market keeps going up. And then you look at the Japanese central bank, and they went to a negative interest rate following Greece. What's going on with that?
Well, I think that there's a lot of shenanigans afoot. A lot of massaging of the markets. I think that's been they've been falsely mucked around with for years now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, this stock market is completely disconnected from reality at this point.
Right.
And the fact is that it should have collapsed. Well, it should have collapsed when you look at the 70s, you look at even just most recently 8 years ago with the troubled asset, whatever the hell it is that they called the bailout. And if you look at the automakers, for example, Chrysler, Sergio Marcon goes like, oh yeah, we're going to go to trucks. We're not going to make the Chrysler 200 or the Dodge Dart anymore. And going like, wait a minute, Chrysler was handed to you by the Obama administration with a taxpayer bailout, handed the fiat, a foreign company that's partially nationalized by the Italian government. Because they didn't have small cars, because the way Daimler managed them, they just focused on trucks and SUVs. I love their trucks and SUVs, but we need to have a diverse product line. Then they come out with two cars actually, the Chrysler 200 and the Dodge Dart, which are based on a Fiat platform, which are supposed to be fuel efficient. And then because they weren't selling as well as they were expecting, they're just going to say, oh, we're not going to make them anymore. We're just going to make trucks. That's how Chrysler fell apart in the first place. I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
Leland,
what's going on?
You can talk about cars all you want, but then you hand the baton over to me and you're like, wait, stop. So Leland's like, let's talk about cars. And it's like, you're talking to a girl here. And yes, I know there are women that are into automobiles, but he's like, so what do you think, Elizabeth, about the auto industry?
Well, not so much about the auto industry, but just the fact that they were a taxpayer bailed out company. And the fact is that they're going down the same path after they spend billions of tax dollars. And then you look at Amazon, and you look at Walmart, you look at Macy's,
yes.
They're closing stores left and right.
What is it? Walmart's just come out saying they're going to be firing about 16,000 more workers. So yeah, it's obviously occurring. But it's so funny you start talking about cars.
I'm distracted by this.
That would be like trying to talk about sports or something. Like, no thank you.
Oh, we could go down there, but we probably won't.
Please don't.
But we've got Jim Mars on. I know. Just bear with us. Growing show, technical.
Well, but here's what we do like. This is what we're into. For example, and I'm sure some of our listeners are into it as well, was the X-Files.
And we will bring Jim Mars on to talk about it. And a little backstory about Jim. He is a New York Times best-selling author. He was a journalist with the Fort Worth Star-Telegraph for a number of decades. He was most well known for his book Crossfire, which is the basis for Oliver Stone's JFK, which is a New York Times bestseller. He has since come out with a ton of other books, such as Our Occulted History, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, and most recently, Population Control. And a good friend of Brave New Books, Jim Mars, welcome to Be Brave Radio. Jim, are you with us? Jim? All right. So we've got some...
That's why we wanted to talk about the X-Files. Yeah. Do. Look, you guys were probably also watching the X-Files the other day, and I found it fascinating that suddenly there's a bunch of information out loud and proud being put out to the herd at large, per se. There's something called revelation of the method, and I think it's, for those of you listening, I think it's something to learn about. Are we still... I'm getting weird signals that... Jim, are you on the line?
Jim?
Okay, well, back to information about revelation of the method. You will find that more and more and more, whether it's on the, the television or, with the movies these days or the X-Files, there's something where you kind of look a little bit behind the curtain. And what that is it goes back to an old Masonic concept in that if you show everybody, if you teach everybody what's actually going on, your karma is clean. So what you'll often see is that you will see all these programs basically teaching a lot of truisms about what's actually going on. Now, mind you, there's also the debate about this being some sort of fictionalization of facts. That's also very possible, that people, when they go, oh, I heard that, I saw that on the X-Files, so it can't actually be true. Now, that is also a possibility.
Hiding it in plain sight. If you look at a lot of movies that came out, whether it is Captain America or Winter Soldier, or was it Kingsman, the Secret Service, they put a lot of these themes in these movies. So we're talking about New World Order, globalism, and the fact that they have poison pills and a lot. Like for Kingsman, they put poison pills, explosives in their brains, more or less. That if they turn around and
if they don't toe the line,
so that's how they keep their mouth shut, more or less.
Well, when you've got substances like scopolamine, in devil's breath, basically being used by all kinds of nefarious types that can just be blown into somebody's face, and then you're basically a zombie for the next several hours. A lot of people feel that that's what happened with James Holmes with the Dark Knight shooting. You can link it all the way back to Sirhan Sirhan. There's all kinds of substances, and what even back in I think it was the late 60s or 70s, there were testimonials basically showing that they had this gun that was like this heart attack gun, and they were doing that back in the 60s. Imagine what they have now. So yeah, it's fascinating. And
you always hear that the government has technology that's at least 4 decades ahead of us.
Yes, the private sector is about, I've heard that they're about 25 years ahead. But I also think that what was interesting that I do feel like is a little bit of disinformation from the X-Files was when they were pushing the fact that they felt like all of this past information, all the past shenanigans were to do with human beings and not aliens. And I feel like there's an awful lot of information that points otherwise. And I'm really excited about Jim Marrs hopefully being able to add on to that. One of my favorite books that I read with him is a book called Our Occulted History. And it really looks at who's really in control above the administrators, who really are the operators, who are the owners, and looking past even the bloodlines and the elites. They definitely believe, if you do the research, if you look at all the different lineages, that they go back to off-planet ancient alien origins even. And I know that sounds a little cuckoo if you haven't done the research, but the more you go down this rabbit warren, per se, the more interesting it gets.
Absolutely. And it's just completely mind-boggling what's going on. The fact they just hide this stuff in plain sight, more or less.
Yeah. Well, for example, there was a bit during the X-Files which I found fascinating because it's a subject that I've begun to research, and it's the subject of psychotronics. There was a bit during the show where the guy was hearing voices that no one else was hearing, and he was hearing this high-pitched noise. And later on in the story, it became more of a psychic anomaly with the chimeras, the genetically hybridized children, per se. And that's one thread that we could look into. But psychotronics has been going on since the late 1960s during the Cold War, and you can actually see some of that in the last couple of years on the news and with certain...
And we will pick this up in the second hour on Be Brave and Be Brave Radio right after this news break. I'm Leland Freeman.
I'm Elizabeth Egan Everett.
And we'll see you after the break.
Neither one can see our world.
And welcome back to the second of 3 hours on Be Brave Radio here on the Logos Radio Network. I think we've got through all of our technical issues, and we have New York Times best-selling author of Crossfire, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, Our Occulted History, and most recently, Population Control. Jim Marrs is with us. Jim, welcome to Be Brave Radio.
Well, thank you very much. It's always a delight to be with you folks.
Yeah, you're a hero of ours. I would say many of your books actually really deeply opened my eyes. One of my favorite ones was Rule by Secrecy, and then Our Occulted History. Just awesome, awesome books.
Well, thank you very much. I really I hope people will read my latest one, The Population Control, How Corporate Owners Are Killing Us, okay? And the reason I say that, Elizabeth, is because, this gets beyond philosophies, beyond political discourse or whatever, conspiracies. This is self-defense. If you don't understand what they're doing to you, then, you don't have the tools you need to protect yourself and your family and your loved ones.
Yep.
And you've been investigating material like this for how many decades have you been a journalist?
Well, if you go back to when I was writing stories and making up pages for a major newspaper, the 4-Star Telegram, under a junior achievement program, that goes back to about 1958. So, about half a century.
And all this really came ahead even all the way back to 1963 during the Kennedy assassination, which was the focus of your first major book.
Right.
And since then, how have they been ramping it up? I mean, when you do your lectures on Crossfire, you call it a coup d'etat, the assassination of a sitting president of the United States, who was the last real president we had.
Well, that's true. I've lived through it all. When I started in journalism, it was very real. In fact, I started off typing on old manual typewriters, and what we'd do is we'd at the newspapers I worked for, they all had the Associated Press teletype machines, and they had these big rolls of paper, and that would go through those machines and just keep chattering, all day and night as they sent stories across the AP wire, and they never let those rolls run out. When they got down pretty low, they would swap them out. Well, we'd go in and get the used rolls, which were not as big and as thick as the original ones, and we'd use those and put those in our typewriter. So we didn't have to keep changing paper. We just keep typing away, until. So when you had your story written, sometimes it's 5 and 6 feet long. And so, as we copyread it, we might decide, this is fact, this sentence and paragraph is more important. It needs to move up in the story. So we all had a pair of scissors and a pot of glue on our desk, and we would literally cut and paste and move things around in the story to where we liked it better. And then, of course, the final story, which would be 6-7 foot long, but with different pasted sections, that would go back to the linotype machines where they set things in type. This is the way it was when I started in journalism. And, of course, now today it's all computer. And, of course, some of that's really good because it spilled over because today in your computer you have a cut and paste function. Okay, but I'm telling you, when I started off, it was actually cut and paste. And so that was kind of a good thing now that you don't have to have messy glue pots all over your desk and you don't have to cut your paper up, But on the other hand, there is a delete button on the computer. And unfortunately, a lot of things just go right into the delete file and it's all gone away. And of course, when you're working with computers, it's garbage in, garbage out. Yeah. If you don't know what you're doing to begin with, you can get awful confused and awful turned around on computers. And if it's not there, it's not there. It's like it never happened. So there's a good side and a bad side to all this new stuff. I think the worst thing that's happened, though, is that when I started in the news business in the 50s, every big city had maybe 2 or 3 newspapers, and plus a lot of weeklies and free throws, as we call them. And today, now there's about 5 giant multinational corporations with interlocking directorships, interlocking ownership that control all of everything we see and hear. These corporations control not only the newspapers, but they control the radio stations, the television stations, major network channels, the satellite, magazines, music, billboards, movies, book clubs. I mean, everything we see and hear is now devolved into just literally a handful of major corporations with interlocking ownership, which means a handful of people decide what we're going to hear, what we're going to see, and how we're going to perceive it.
Now, getting into your latest book, Population Control, How the Corporate Owners Are Killing Us, why do they want to get rid of 95% of the world population? Because I remember this famous quote of yours that you said that you could put everyone on the planet in a comfortable, 3,000 square feet, and you wouldn't even fill up Texas.
Right.
Well, we can't be controlled. That's why.
Yeah,
the amount of people.
Well, what they want to do, if you try to go to, I think you guys are down around Austin. So if you go to one of the state parks or one of the national parks down around there, on a weekend, there's other people there. Okay. Oh my God. So these wealthy people, they don't want to share the world with just the riffraff, meaning us. Okay. And so and most of them, particularly at the dizzying heights of wealth and power, these people basically come from families who have bought into the whole eugenics movement. And eugenics, of course, was actually started in the United States back in the 1800s. And the whole idea of eugenics is to try to improve the race. Okay. They want to get the dirty rim out of the gene pool. Mm-hmm. And their idea is, that we need to improve the race, and we can do this by selective breeding, by only staying within your own class, your own race, etc. And interestingly enough, eugenics really kind of took off by the 1930s. Almost every state had sterilization laws. If you didn't meet their criteria for race or bone structure or intelligence, then you were liable to sterilization. What happened with that was that the Germans picked up on that, and they really went for it. And they said, well, we're the master race, and so we just need to cull the Untermensch, the non-humans. And so we had World War II and the Holocaust, and so the term eugenics kind of fell into disrepute because they carried it to its natural extreme. We have some people here that we don't think fit in the gene pool, so we'll just get rid of them. But I'm telling you, the attitude and the belief in eugenics and the belief that some people are superior to others is still held to by these people in what the Occupy movement called 1%, or the New World Order, or the Illuminati, or the Committee of 300, or whatever you want to call them. Okay, this is the less than 1% of very wealthy people in the world who pretty much control the world's economy, and they certainly control the United States through the Federal Reserve System, which is neither federal nor does it have any reserves. It is a collection of private banks owned by private banks who are in turn owned by these very wealthy people, and they still have the idea that we need to cull the population. They also, the big question I always get is, well, wait a minute, if they're trying to kill us off, aren't they also killing themselves off? And the answer is no, not really, because they have, number one, access to advanced technology in healthcare and in food processing, et cetera, et cetera.
Look at David Rockefeller. He's 101 years old.
Yeah, exactly. And Henry Kissinger, not telling how old he is.
Right.
I gave you an example. I spoke to a fellow not long back who was involved in the sale of a very expensive boat, kind of a yacht, I suppose, in South Texas. And he said one of the Rothschilds flew over from Europe to inspect or to make a bid on this yacht. And he said this fellow that came over from the Rothschilds brought his own food and his own water and would not eat or drink anything available in Texas.
Wow.
So see, these people just simply do not live the same life that the rest of us do.
Well, and isn't there some rule of law that you learn about when you study into the Georgia Guidestones, that first rule that says maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature?
Exactly.
It's about them controlling the resources, and also it's about control. We're too unruly at this point. There's too many of us in their minds to be able to actually do what it is that they want to do and control things how they'd like to.
Exactly. In their grand scheme of things, what they would like to see is a depopulated world, a depopulated United States, where there's only a few million, and they, of course, would have all of the penthouses. They would have the big ranches, the big mansions. And then there would be a group of semi-literate people subservient, who would serve them and mow the lawns, cook the food, do the shopping.
And now they're developing robotic technology, so they probably won't even need that.
Yeah, right. So we don't even need those much anymore. And so they're working to do this. They're trying to turn, and everyone who's left alive, and Elizabeth, you're absolutely right. That you quoted from the Georgia Guidestones, which a lot of people think are marching orders for the New World Order. Now, here's the thing. They want to maintain the humanity at 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Well, that sounds warm and fuzzy, but wait a minute. There's 7.5 billion of us on this planet right now. And that leads to the burning question, what do they expect to do with the other 7 billion of us? And more importantly, who's going to decide what happens to the other 7
Bill
billion?
and Melinda Gates with their little society right now, with all these things starting to crop up, like, the Zika virus and the Tdap vaccine, the mandated vaccines that happened in Brazil recently.
Or if you go back to Prescott Bush, he was one of the big proponents of Planned Parenthood, which is voluntary euthanization.
Yeah.
Euthanization, I think is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Abortions.
Exactly. And they're doing this. They're doing it. Sometimes they're doing this overtly. Take your vaccine. Oh, it didn't work too well, so come back and get the second round, or come back and get the third round. In 2014, UNICEF and the World Health Organization injected 2 million Kenyan women with a vaccine that they later found was laced with a sterilization chemical.
Oh my! And that's
in fact, I some years ago spoke to a guy who'd worked for the NSA.
Jim, can we're about ready to come up to a break. We'll pick this up in the next segment. This is Be Brave Radio. We will be back right after this.
See y'all soon. Now.
This is the Logos Radio Network.
I give my heart and soul to the one. Spend all of our lives going out of our minds, looking back to our birth, forward to our demise. Even scientists say everything is just light, create and destroy, but it turns bright. Masters in every time, Lord in every place, those who stood up for love, them in spite of the hate. In spite of the hate, who put the flower in the barrel of their gun? Who lit the candle, started the fire, burned down the fortress, the throne? Who could house all the refugees in a single shack or a lonely bungalow?
And welcome back to Be Brave Radio here on the Logos Radio Network on this January 30th, 2016, brought to you by Brave New Books, Nature's Pure Organics, Hill Country, and Hill Country Home Improvement, and Cabo Bob's.
Cabo Bob's.
Elizabeth, why don't you lead into with the next question for Jim Mars?
Well, we were talking over the break, and there's a couple really serious subjects that I would love for Jim to extrapolate on. We were both discussing the Planet Nine, and we were also discussing the Oregon shootings and the execution of Lavoy Finicum. So I will let Jim decide to where he wants to go and teach us a thing or two.
Well, I think the shooting of Lavoy Finicum has quickly dropped from the news. I went on, I guess, Google News this morning, and there's all kinds of save the chipmunks, and one shark ate another shark, and we got all these stories. No, nothing in there about the Oregon situation, and yet this gets to the crux of American constitutionality. This should be major headlines. This should be, I'm waiting for the White Lives Matter movement to start,
Hello.
That's Donald Trump campaign,
where's the president talking about we must do better, and not gun down our honest, God-fearing fathers of 10,
11, yeah.
No. Instead, the only thing I saw about Obama today is he's going to meet with Muslim leaders, as well he should. He's a Muslim himself.
Yeah.
And I say that because in his book, Songs of My Father, which I've actually looked at, he made the quote. He said, if the going gets tough, I will side with the Muslims.
Wow.
And everything he said and done supports that. For example, during Ramadan, which was the Muslim holiday, they noticed that he was not wearing his wedding ring or his watch. And the White House said, they went in the shop for repairs. Well, okay, maybe a watch gets repaired, but how do you repair a wedding ring? Now, the truth was it was Ramadan, and according to Quran tradition, Muslim tradition, you don't wear jewelry on Ramadan. So everything he said and done supports the idea that he is a closet Muslim. Of course, we don't hear about that. And then when you have somebody like Lavoy Finicum, a white person with no criminal background, who pays his taxes, who goes to church, he gets gunned down, and nothing much happens about that. Well, and by the way, if you want to know what really happened, of course, on the social media, there's a lot of comment going back and forth, and of course, the FBI has stated that he was reaching for his inside his coat for a gun, except they haven't ever produced a gun. And besides that, the photographs that we have of him, he was armed, but he was wearing a pistol on his right hip. Okay. He wasn't going for that. And besides that, then they said, well, he was rushing the police. Hey, it's in 2 or 3 feet of snow. How fast can you rush somebody in 2 or 3 feet of snow?
I'm actually surprised at how fast they released the video. Was it 2 days later? Usually they wait years, like with the Kennedy assassination.
I know. And by the way, if you'll notice, it says at the top, and they say in their thing, this is an edited version.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, if you edit it, how do you know what they
Oh, well,
I think the truth of the matter is found with Victoria Sharp, who was the 18-year-old singer, young girl who was in the truck, and she explains everything. She said that they were pulled over or stopped there on the road with these vehicles with the flashing red and blue lights. They stopped. And she said, Lavoie leaned out the window and said, hey, I'm going to go talk to the sheriff. And she said, meanwhile, all those little red dots indicating a laser sight were flashing all over the truck, and that shots were fired, one or more. Well, Lavoie, he wants to protect the people in the truck, so that's why he took off. And he's driving off, not realizing that they had a roadblock further down the road. And when he gets to the roadblock, then he swerves to try to avoid the roadblock. And that's when, if you'll notice, one of these agents jumps out in front of his truck. Okay. Yep. What's that all about? Well, that's to say that he was being aggressive and attacking a lawman. Okay. Which gives them the right to fire back because they're protecting themselves. But even then he stops, he gets out of the truck. He's got his hands in the air. And according to Victoria, he's going, what are you going to do? Shoot me? And as he walks up with his hands in there, and then, yes, he kind of clutches towards his middle. Well, I think, again, we go to the witness who said that there were snipers in the trees. And we do know that Delta Force members were on hand, and the FBI snipers and SWAT team type guys. And typical sniper technique is you first shoot for the body mass, and then to stop and stun your opponent, and then you go for the head. And I think that's exactly what we see here. I think he was clutching at his stomach because I think that's where he got shot. And then he gets shot in the head. And then when he's on the ground, they continue to shoot at him and then don't even go over to try to see if they could, give him some aid for about 10 minutes. Yep. And then also, according to the official story, he was acting aggressively, so they had to shoot him. But then why did they continue to shoot at the truck filled with innocent people? All right, just as Victoria said.
And notice no audio was released with the video.
Exactly, so you don't hear all the shots. But
what people are yelling.
You can clearly see that the windshields on the truck are shattered. There's a big hole in the front windshield. They obviously continue to shoot at the truck with innocent people in it. And there's some controversy. Some people said they were throwing flashbang grenades at the truck, but then there's also, Victoria said they were firing incendiary bullets. And this, to me, kind of rings true because what happened at Waco, they burned.
I was thinking the exact same thing, Waco.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And so, again, somebody says, well, you have to, the FBI says, well, wait a minute. Let's think about the FBI. Let's go back to the Kennedy assassination where they fabricated evidence, lied about everything. Let's go to Ruby Ridge. Let's go to Waco where they lied about not shooting into the compound, and yet it was later determined, they continued to fire in there. And then when the tanks came in, they knocked down the entrances and stairways so nobody could escape, and they burned up all the evidence. The front door of the Branch Davidian home, which could have shown bullets entering or exiting and probably shown who fired first, that was handed over to the FBI, and now they say it's missing. How about Fast and Furious? Okay.
Yeah.
Eric Holder, excuse me.
The Whitehurst scandal, the guy who had been in charge of the FBI crime lab, and he said they fabricated evidence all the time. Caused a huge stink briefly. Of course, you don't hear about that ongoing like you hear if some thug gets shot,
What about the drug running through Mena, Arkansas through, Iran-Contra for the Bushes and the Clintons and coordinated by Oliver North back in the 80s?
Right. And by the way, there was a story that appeared in Newsweek that Oliver North was involved along with the principal people there in the Reagan administration, which included Dick Cheney, included Donald Rumsfeld, to where they had made plans to suspend the Constitution and declare martial law and take over the United States. Folks, this is the mentality that we're dealing with, and they're absolutely ruthless. They don't care who they kill. They don't care who, as long as it furthers their goals. And what are their goals? Their goals are absolute power. Okay, that's what it is. And then this brings us back to population control, the fact that they're trying to decimate the population. Even though several states have now legalized medical marijuana, the feds are still saying, no, it's against the law, and they're still busting people. Maybe that's because in research at the University of Madrid and at the University of London, they have found that THC, the active psychoactive ingredient of pot, actually kills cancer cells.
Yes.
Okay. And so, here's something that's a wild weed that grows anywhere that could compete with the billion dollar cancer industry and the big pharmaceutical corporations who are actually killing a lot of people with chemotherapy, which, it may take care of your cancer for a few years, but it also destroys your immunization system. And most chemo patients don't live past about 5 years. And, of course, when they die of pneumonia or is some other kind of...
Jim, we will pick this up after this quick commercial break here on the Logos Radio Network. This is Be Brave Radio. We will be back after this short break.
See you soon.
Children conceived through fertility treatments are more likely to suffer serious birth defects than babies conceived naturally. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht, and in a moment I'll have details on a groundbreaking study on the risks of fertility treatments.
Privacy is under attack. When you give up data about yourself, you'll never get it back again. And once your privacy is gone, you'll find your freedoms will start to vanish too. So protect your rights, say no to surveillance, and keep your information to yourself. Privacy, it's worth hanging on to. This message is brought to you by StartPage.com, the private search engine alternative to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Start over with StartPage.
These days, childless couples are turning to fertility clinics in record numbers, but a new study finds the risk of birth defects in babies conceived through fertility treatments is significantly higher than average. After reviewing 300,000 birth records, researchers found that 8% of fertility babies suffered from heart, genital, kidney, brain, and lung problems. That's 40% higher than babies conceived naturally. What's more, the risk of birth defects tripled when mothers use clomiphene citrate, a drug that induces ovulation. With millions of babies born each year through fertility treatments, it's about time doctors began telling their patients about these risks. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht for StartPage.com, the world's most private search engine.
I actually be kidding about chemtrails.
Live Free Speech Radio, LogosRadioNetwork.com.
Then when I get back on my feet again, I can climb so high that I won't feel low. And I keep on praying, baby, that when I get where I am going, you'll be showing me.
And welcome back to Be Brave Radio here on the Logos Radio Network on this January 30th, 2016, brought to you by Brave New Books, Hill Country Home Improvement, Nature's Pure Organics, and Cabo Bob's. And Elizabeth, you wanted to finish up the previous topic with Jim.
Yeah, please. Jim, you were talking a little bit about the execution of Lavoy Finicum, and what I wanted to understand a little deeper is why they feel like they have to silence so quickly and take out all these people that are, standing up for our rights of the federal lands, especially over in the western part of the country. If you could extrapolate on that a little bit, that'd be great.
Well, yes, what it comes down to is this is a repeat of one of the biggest scandals in American history prior to Watergate, and that was the 1921 Teapot Dome scandal, which you may or may not have even gotten mentioned in your history classes.
No, nothing.
But it was a huge thing at the time. So what was the Teapot Dome scandal all about? It was about that the Secretary of the Interior, a fellow named Fell, had sold mineral rights, gas and oil rights to the private oil companies out of the naval reserves in California called Teapot Dome. In other words, he was making money off of the sale of public land rights, not the land, but the mineral rights, the gas and oil, to private companies. And folks, it was a huge scandal at the time. People went to prison, etc. And today we're seeing the exact same thing happening. The Bundy Ranch. The reason they wanted the Bundy Ranch is because there were mineral deposits there, and they wanted control over the land. So Harry Reid, who was heavily involved, making millions, dealing with a China company that wanted to build a huge solar farm there and had already made deals with them. He was hot to get the Bundy property, and his son was also involved in that sale, and he used the Bureau of Land Management, the BLM, to crack down on the Bundys to try to get them to move and sell out and everything else. And the head of the BLM happened to be a former top advisor to Harry Reid. So it was all an insider deal to make money.
And then knows that Harry Reid got roughed up right after that, and he claims it was an exercise machine.
He accidentally fell down. I think somebody caught him in a back alley. But anyway, and now we see the same thing going on with the Hammonds, all right? Their ranch sits right in the middle of some public land and BLM managed land that happens to have some rich in uranium, okay? And what's happening there? Well, there is a shady company out of Canada called Uranium One who has been selling our uranium to Russia. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And the 7 of the top Uranium One officials have all contributed collectively about $145 million to Hillary Clinton's campaign. Okay. So they bribe these U.S. officials, and then the U.S. officials trigger the IRS or the BLM or the Fish and Wildlife, and they go after these ranchers and these farmers, try to run them off their land so they can make it public land so they can sell mineral and gas and oil rights and line their own pockets.
It's crazy what they have with environmental protection laws. I learned in a hunter safety course, for example, was it the game wardens? They can go on your property without a warrant under the environmental protection law saying, oh, did you illegally hunt an animal? It's crazy.
Well, this is how they've gotten away with all this. It's always in the name of protecting the environment. And, of course, once they say that, then all your libtards, they just, we got to protect the environment, and they all go for it and support it. And then even the conservatives have to kind of back off a little bit, because I don't know of anybody who doesn't have a genuine care and concern about our environment and about protecting certain species and trying, but it's the same thing. Well, I guess a big example is the deer population here in Texas, particularly down in South Texas. My mother-in-law lives on the Llano River, and boy, when during deer hunting season, it sounds like a battle zone down there.
Wow.
And of course, you've got these people who live in the big cities. They never even see a deer except on TV or in a zoo, and they go, "Oh, the poor little deer." But if you actually live in South Texas, you know that deer propagate like rabbits, and that there is a real problem with that. And to cull some of the deer population is actually beneficial to the land and to the deer. And I suspect that at the highest levels, they feel the same way about us. So it's okay to cull the human population, because that actually makes things better, But people need to understand all this and understand what's going on. For instance, I bet you guys don't even understand that the western states are predominantly now owned by the federal government. Nevada, 85% of Nevada is public land, is federal land, okay? 50%, 44% California, 50% in Oregon. Now, wait a minute. Where in the Constitution does it ever say that the federal government's supposed to own all the land? But they are grabbing more and more and more under the guise of either national security or environmental. And then these criminals up in Washington then are selling off the rights to these lands to these multinational corporations. It's really an incredible story. And, of course, you're not going to hear about this in the mainstream corporate media, because they own that too.
Yes. Well said, Jim. Isn't it also falling into something that I don't think a lot of people fully understand yet, which is Agenda 21?
Absolutely. And that's what Agenda 21 is all about, trying to see with this 1%, actually it's even a lot less than 1% that own the vast majority of the wealth in the world. And they're not satisfied with that. They want more. And what they really want is a essentially population-less North America, where they can enjoy themselves in their opulent lifestyle in the big cities, and then on the weekends and on vacations go out to the wilderness where they can enjoy the beauty of nature, and with just enough people there to see to their creature comforts. This is what they want. And
I think it's also something to do with the fact that a lot of them are psychopaths, and they get off on power and controlling other people, and then it actually goes into, more nefarious, occultic reasons that we're not taught about in school.
Well, that's exactly right. And that's why you mentioned my book, Ruled by Secrecy. That has had tremendous acceptance by the reading public. And if you'll read that, it tracks back these secret societies that are still trying to control us today, the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, and it traces them right back through Cecil Rhodes's self-proclaimed conspiracy of the Round Tables, and all the way back to the Knights Templars, who brought the secrets from the Middle East, and all the way back to the ancient mystery schools of Greece and Egypt. And then that tracks back even further. And if you'll read that, and if you'll read my book, Our Occulted History, it goes beyond just psychopaths. All right. There's somebody trying to control the entire world. And the evidence is pretty obvious once you really begin to study it, that they may not even be us.
Yeah, agreed. I love it. Those are some of my favorite books. Absolutely. I'll put them. I think what's really important about your work, Jim, is that when I meet people that are just starting to wake up and they're like, well, what do I do? What do I research? What do I read? I have often gone to your books, putting them into their hands to start that process. I think you explained it very, very well.
Well, it's all pretty much there when you really look at it in its totality. Of course, we never get that in the corporate mass media. They just, it's a day-to-day, diarrhea of facts, figures, statistics, and all this happened today. And oh, by the way, somebody grew a giant tomato, or there's always a lot. It just fills your head. And the same thing on television. In fact, if you think about television, so many people get their news from television. Well, let's look at the news on television. The 10 o'clock news is one of the most widely viewed TV programs ever. That's why they're full of commercials, because they can charge the highest rates during the news program, because during all the other programming, whether it's a sitcom or a reality show or whatever, it's split. The audience is split up. Some people watch comedy, some people watch NPR, some or PBS, some people, and so it's split up. But everybody watches the news, and so that's their prime deal. Well, we got 10 o'clock news. So you got a half hour, and so you got about almost 15 minutes of that, or certainly 10 minutes is advertising. So that leaves you 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And then you got sports, of course, and then you've got your feature stories. So in other words, actually, when it gets to actual news, you usually have about 5, no more than 10 minutes. Well, how can you explain anything in 10 minutes? You can't. So all they can do is give you some headlines. And how many times have you seen a news program where they announce some particular news item and you go, wow, and then you tune back in the next day to find out what's that about and how do we find out?
Jim, we will pick this up after this quick commercial break, ironically enough. Here on the Logos Radio Network, this is Be Brave Radio. We will be right back. And welcome back to Be Brave Radio here on the Logos Radio Network on this January 30th, 2016. We've got best-selling author Jim Marrs here with us. I think we only have him for one more segment. So, Elizabeth, why don't you lead off with the first question?
It's so frustrating because there's so much I want to talk to you about, Jim, and you're a fount of knowledge and knowledge that I really deeply respect for all the work that you've done. But, I wanted to talk about Planet Nine, but in all honesty, I think probably what we should cover very quickly in this last segment is that Trump is the straw man, basically, and you have a lot of information on that, I think.
Well, when it comes to Donald Trump, I mean, I'll hand him this. He has certainly brought up some very important issues, such as immigration, such as the financial situation we're in, and that, if he hadn't been there, the other candidates probably wouldn't have even broached those subjects. So I'll give him that. But my problem is that I have found that when something seems to be too good to be true, it usually is. And when you look at Trump's background, the fact that he has made millions and millions being an establishment guy, dealing with all the corporations, he was very closely connected to Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. And of course, you can say, well, you have to do that to deal in the business world. And that's probably true. But he's also, by blood relations, is too closely connected to Israel. And of course, it's the Zionists that are causing so much problem around the world. And so what I'm just afraid of is that he's a straw man. Okay. He's the controlled opposition. He's galvanizing the conservative element, for some of the more fringe conservative elements. And of course, the mainstay Republicans, the rhinos, the Republicans in name only, they hate him. They've been blasting, and it's caused a lot of dissension in the ranks of the Republicans already. Mm-hmm. And so what I see happening is that when they get to the Republican National Convention, excuse me, the old guard will come to the fore and say, well, he's too radical. We really can't, he wouldn't be a good choice, and they're going to choose somebody else.
Do you feel the Democrats?
Maybe Ted Cruz, except Ted Cruz is a Canadian. I'm not, they're going to be asking for trouble if they nominate him, because, the Democrats are immediately going to file suit saying, well, he's not constitutionally.
Yes. Do you feel that?
The answer there is, if they say, well, Ted Cruz is not constitutionally, ready and constitutionally stable to run, they're going to turn around and say, well, neither was Obama, but he got in, and that's okay.
Do you feel the Democrats are going to do the same thing if Sanders gets a nomination, especially with this pending indictment by Hillary? And how did it get this far where the FBI actually might be indicting Hillary Clinton?
Oh, well, they haven't. They've gotten this far because the Clintons wield tremendous political power, not only just through their politics, but through their Clinton Foundation, which has been taken, even the New York Times has reported on this. They've taken money under the table from every foreign government, every foreign corporation. This is globalism. This is the new world order. These are not people who care about the United States of America. In fact, in their mind, we're probably one of the less profitable divisions of the world, okay? And so I think what's going to happen is it looks more and more. I don't see Hillary Clinton getting a nomination. If she gets the nomination, I don't really see her winning because, number one, there's a question of health. And, of course, they're not bringing this up to the fore. Some of the tabloids have carried it, and they're not really talking about this because, after all, she is the top excuse me. She's the top money gatherer for the Democrats. But I think as we progress in the year and as possible indictments come out against her, and if people will start actually studying her background and all her failed endeavors and all of her, she was kicked off the Watergate investigation for unethical behavior. And if they look at the list of dead people in the wake of the Clintons' political career, I think most people will begin to turn away from her.
And the Obamas. I mean, look at Andrew Breitbart, look at Joan Rivers, look at even Bernie Mac. That was a funny death.
Well, and how about the questionable daughter, the woman that was killed with Obama's supposed love child, the dentist's assistant?
Well,
what happened?
What I loved was the story of the choir boys there at Reverend Wright's church that Obama attended, and they all were part of a homosexual ring, and they were all end up shot in the mouth, which is typical. And then the choirmaster, who apparently was not part of this homosexual ring, but undoubtedly knew about it, he gets killed too. And I think that was to close off any of the discussion. Larry Sinclair, of course, is still out there and still talking, and he says that he smoked crack with Obama and that Obama was a homosexual. But of course they managed to say, well, he's just he's a nut and don't listen to him. But so they got rid of all the choir boys and the choir director who could probably have supported all that.
Wow.
So it's all big. It's terrible. It's nasty. And you're right, Elizabeth, they're psychopaths. They're criminals. I hear people, try to tell people about this and they go, well, I don't want to talk politics. Hey, I'm with them. Okay. I don't want to talk politics. I want to talk criminal activity. Okay. And this is what we're facing here in this country. And yet, of course, because they control the mass media, we never really get a chance to talk about it. So anyway, my bottom line is the Republicans, they will shun Trump, and they will probably end up picking somebody else, at which time Trump's going to say, well, yeah, but all the people support me, so he'll run as a third-party candidate. It'll split the conservative vote, and the Democrat will get in, whoever that may be.
Oh,
now, and the reason I say that isn't some idle speculation. That is standard operating procedure. Go back and look at George Wallace and George McGovern and all these people that they ran in as disruptors who are going to split up the opposition vote so that the New World Order people get in office. It's just standard operating procedure.
No, but don't you think that if they bring in Biden, for example, I mean, isn't he, like, you've got a lot of information about how creepy Biden is, right? I mean, the pedophilic, but all the pedophilic, questions surrounding him. Yeah.
Right. And shotgun Biden, him and, well, just get a shotgun.
Get a little shotgun.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. It's crazy over the internet.
Folks, I tell you what, if you took what's really going on in this country and made it into a script and took it to Hollywood, they'd just run you out of the office and laugh. Well, that's it. That couldn't happen. People will never buy that.
Yeah.
But we are, because we're told to by the corporate mass media.
Oh, yeah, getting back to that, the fact that they put these disruptors back and going back all the way to the 1912 elections when they had Teddy Roosevelt run as the bull moose.
Exactly.
And
let's look at that real quick, because that's how they got in the financial situation we are today because of the Federal Reserve System and how they get the Federal Reserve System in. Well, Howard Taft was running as the Republican in 1912, and then they put up Woodrow Wilson as the Democrat, and Wilson, right from the start, was put in there as the Democratic candidate and expressed full support for the new banking bill, which had created the Federal Reserve. Taft, the Republican, said, no, this is a bill of and for the bankers. And he said, I'll never support that. In fact, I will veto it, if it gets to my desk. And Taft was, according to the polls at that time, the favorite one to win. So what did they do? They went and they got Teddy Roosevelt, talked him into running, a very popular guy, talked him to running as the Bull Moose Independent Party candidate. And it it split the conservative vote. Woodrow Wilson got in, and one of the first things he did was set up the IRS and the income tax system, which we've not had since prior to 1830. And he created the Federal Reserve System, which is private bankers running, private banks that control our economy. And that was the beginning of the decline of the Republic of the United States.
Now, what's your take on? There's a lot of new information that's coming out about the Titanic disaster. A lot of
it's the Olympic.
The
Olympic.
A lot of the people on board,
insurance camp,
like was it Benjamin Guggenheim and John Jacob Astor, were against the Federal Reserve System.
I know,
the ship was owned by J.P. Morgan.
I know, and they were all invited to go on the maiden cruise of this wonderful new ship. It hit an iceberg and went down, and the people, the rich people in the United States, the most wealthy people, the most influential people who oppose the Federal Reserve System, they went down with the Titanic. And you mentioned the sister ship. I've looked at that fairly closely, and I think it's now pretty much obvious that the Titanic was not even the Titanic.
Exactly.
It was the sister ship.
It was the Olympic.
The Olympic, which had suffered some damage, and it was not cost effective to try to repair it. And so they put the Astors and these other wealthy opponents to the Federal Reserve System on it and sent it into dangerous waters, probably even with the very hope that something might happen to it, and it did.
And the reason why they switched the name is that they got a better insurance payout, because instead of having already a damaged ship, they said, well, the ship was damaged already. We're not going to pay out the full value of a new ship.
Right.
They just said, freak action of an iceberg.
It's the Titanic, and it's a brand new ship, and it's the most advanced ship in the world, and we get all kinds of stuff. Doesn't that sound kind of like what Larry Silverstein did with the World Trade Centers, right?
6 weeks later.
I was just about to say, it's like, hey, come on over. Hey, Mike, what's the story about Michael Jackson saying that he was invited to breakfast or something that very morning, up in the Twin Towers, and he actually just didn't go. Or the woman who spoke to Obama and asked him to expose 9/11, and then he gave her a free ticket. You two can have a free ticket on the plane, and then the plane,
or the mayor of Los Angeles, I believe it was, who got a call from his friend Condoleezza Rice and says, cancel your flight to New York the next day. Don't go there.
We got less than a minute left in this segment. How do you want to wrap this up, or can you stay with one more segment?
Okay, one more.
All right. Well, this
15 minutes, right?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So this is Be Brave Radio, brought to you by Brave New Books, Hill Country Home Improvements, Nature's Pure Organics, and our newest sponsor, Cabo Bob's, on the Logos Radio Network. Please go to logosradionetwork.com. Click on the information for the pledge drive to keep that network up and running. There's actually a couple prizes from Central Texas Gunworks and My Magic Mud available. We will be back with the third hour of Be Brave Radio right after this short commercial break and news break. Stay tuned.